The ghost wore the gray robes of a peasant farmer and bore an expression filled with hate. He would fade into thin air at the rooster's first crow, only to appear the following evening at sundown. Welcome to The Night Visitors, where we share purportedly true accounts of interactions with vampires and other supernatural predators. I'm James, a paranormal researcher and lifelong vampire enthusiast, coming to you from Transylvania. The following is a true story with names and identifying details changed to protect the privacy of those involved. Tonight's story comes to us from Honolulu, Hawaii, and occurred in that city's Chinatown in 1923. I first learned of this account from a woman named Judy that I worked with as a substitute teacher in the early 2000s. One day, while Judy and I were on recess duty, I casually mentioned that I was interested in anything having to do with the supernatural, and she jumped at the chance to share the following story. Judy had met Betty, the protagonist of tonight's tale, sometime in the mid-1970s at a dim sum restaurant that Betty owned on Oahu. Betty was a friendly and talkative woman. One afternoon, while Judy was sitting alone at the restaurant, Betty approached her and started a conversation. They developed a friendship that lasted decades, and they even kept in touch via postal mail in an age before the internet. In one of her letters, Betty shared an incident that had occurred in her younger years involving two ghosts and various elements of the occult. It's a stretch to call this one a vampire story, but it still could be classified as such, since one of the entities involved was menacing and parasitic in nature. When Betty turned 17, she was engaged to marry a very rich and very cruel man in her native Fujian province. Refusing to condemn herself to a lifetime of domestic misery, she fled by cover of night to British Hong Kong. She enjoyed her time in the territory, and it was there that she acquired her English name that she used throughout her life. But Betty knew that her fiancé had too much power and influence in China, and even had associates among the Hong Kong triads, the city's infamous organized crime syndicates. She knew she had to go as far away as possible and arranged passage to Honolulu in the then U.S. territory of Hawaii. An elderly couple offered her board and a modest salary in exchange for working in their noodle and bao shop in Chinatown. Betty was an amazing cook, and she spoke perfect English and several dialects of Chinese, and customers loved her warm and friendly demeanor. The shop grew rapidly from a moderately successful family business into a flourishing wholesale company. Word travels quickly from the Chinese diaspora back to the homeland, and it was just a matter of weeks until Betty's fiancé learned of her whereabouts. In China, he could have had her kidnapped and brought directly to him, but fortunately, he did not exercise such power and influence in Hawaii. He resorted to the only weapon left in his arsenal: witchcraft. A loyal client informed Betty that back in Fujian province, her husband had paid a corrupt temple priest to place a curse on Betty to knock her from her current heights of success and prosperity to a low place of poverty and desperation. His efforts proved futile. Betty was a fervent believer in the old ways and was very devout in serving her ancestors and seeking the blessing of the Taoist gods. She had a small altar in the back of the noodle shop where she burned incense and sought the help and consolation of Guanyin, the goddess of mercy. Her prayers acted as a shield so no evil could touch her, and she continued to prosper in business and stay in good health. The one manifestation of the priest's evil magic of which Betty could not rid herself was the presence of a malevolent ghost that would appear at nightfall and stay throughout the night, sitting in a chair in the corner of her bedroom, with his eyes like glowing coals fixed on her in a never-breaking stare. Wore the gray robes of a peasant farmer and bore an expression filled with hate. He would fade into thin air at the rooster's first crow, only to appear the following evening at sundown in the presence of this foul spirit, and the stray cats that Betty fed on the terrace refused to enter the premises in the hours when the ghost manifested. This night visitor did not harm Betty in any way, perhaps due to her fervent prayers for help and protection, or because of the garlic and jujubes she strew about the room, which are traditional defenses against spiritual attacks in Chinese folklore. Despite the lack of outright aggression, Betty found this unholy spirit to be frightening and oppressive, and wished with all her soul for it to be gone. One night, Betty awoke at 3 a.m. to find the ghost sitting in his usual spot by the door, kept at bay by the herbs and talismans scattered about the room. Then, out of nowhere, there appeared a shining white orb from which a young woman materialized. She was shimmering and pale as moonlight, wearing a simple white dress and with a single pink hibiscus flower tucked behind her ear. Immediately, Betty knew her to be a benevolent guardian spirit native to the islands. She felt a strange comfort in her presence, a sense of peace and belonging she hadn't experienced since leaving China, and she knew this apparition of warmth and light not only offered protection against the evil entity that haunted her, but was welcoming her to her new home. The radiant young woman walked towards the now cowering and trembling unclean spirit, smiled at him and stomped her foot. The unwelcome ghost exploded into a cloud of smoke, and Betty never saw him again. She did, however, see the apparition of the young woman on several occasions throughout her life, usually preceding a happy event or unexpected blessing. She never learned her name or where she had come from, but Betty never doubted the benevolence and protective nature of her otherworldly benefactor. I hope you have enjoyed tonight's episode. At the Night Visitors Vampire Research Society, we would love to hear about your experiences with vampires and other supernatural entities. Are vampires a part of the traditional folklore of your culture or country? Write to us at thenightvisitorsvrs@gmail.com. Subscribe to our newsletter where you will receive each week's episode directly in your inbox, as well as articles on vampire lore and vampires in popular culture. A special thanks to composer Tim Kulig for our intro music, Haunted House.